Okay, good morning, everyone. Let us continue what we were learning this week in Torah Or. And this week in Torah Or, we're learning about a complicated subject, but in the end, it comes out to be very, very simple. And that is, what is God? Before we begin, let's give charity. Charity saves from the worst things. There's charity box. There's the money. There's our money. And Hashem should protect all of our soldiers with heart, broken heart. There was 6 of them that got killed yesterday. That fell yesterday. Breaks your heart to see their pure faces. God should reveal why all this terrible stuff is happening now. For sure, Moshiach has to come any instant, but maybe our giving charity will put the end to all of this confusion. Okay, yesterday we learned that God hides himself from the world in order to create the world. And that basically he does it in 2 ways. Number one is from above the world of Atzilut to Atzilut. Atzilut is the highest spiritual levels. In a way, it's not really even a spiritual level. It's like the revelation of the Creator. And from Atzilut, which is the highest of these 4 dimensions of reality, comes worlds that are lower than it. And those worlds are not created by a tzimtzum, which means God removing, so to speak, his light, but by means of articulating the light. And here he gives an example, like giving a mashal, giving a like a parable to understand something, or an example to understand something very deep. So you give a simple parable to understand some very, very deep idea. And the parable is dealing with simple things that even a person that has a very small mind can understand, or at least a beginning mind, get people interested. And then if he doesn't understand that, so you have to give a mashal to understand that mashal. You have to give an example to explain the example. So King Solomon, he could do that 3,000 times. His mind was so deep. He could actually bring down his deep ideas 3,000 levels. So that's something like what it is from the world of Atzilut, the dimension of godliness, which is called Atzilut, to Bria, and then again to Yetzira, and then to Asiya, lower and lower levels. So there's 2 ways that God is concealing from himself from us. And when we think God concealing himself, it's not like a child hides behind a tree or under the bed or something. And God is not a thing that you can find him. God is a type of reality that we have no idea what that reality is. So the more real, maybe you can take the example, let's say a blind person explaining to him what the color green is, right? You could explain all you want, but maybe you can give him like sort of examples. Maybe somehow or other he can extrapolate to understand what it is. So let's say a person was blind to being blind, and then he was blind to being blind to being blind. So it's like we can't see reality, but how far away are we from what reality really is, that God is the creator? It says, therefore, God, in order to create the world, that's how the Bible begins, that God creates the world, and that's the end of this huge, long process, spiritual process, in order for God to create the world. But the Rebbe assures us that this does not in no way separate us from God. And he gave the example of a person that can put in his mind, he can think of something. Let's say a person thinks in his mind, he thinks of a car, or he thinks of a rock. So he thinks of a rock, puts in his mind, thinks of a rock. So that rock, so to speak, exists in his mind, even though the rock is not human, and it's not animal, it's not even plant. It's just a rock, but it's encompassed by his mind. So is also that all these different levels that we're talking about and dimensions are all encompassed in God's oneness. The Rebbe assures us that this is a thing which is impossible to understand, but a little bit, if you think about it, you can get the idea of what's going on. Now, what's the purpose of all this? The purpose of all this is that we should come to love God, and we should understand a little bit about how incredibly real God is. And the more we think about this, the more we can come to love God, and the more it activates us, because this God, as immense as he is, whatever you want to call it, and as real as he is, that he's like a trillion, billion times removed his reality from our reality, but nevertheless, he's creating us, and he cares about us, and we're very important to him. And every movement we make is very important to him. It says that's what's called God's sphirot. That's what sphirot. If you look in the beginning of this, of Tikkun Zohar, in the book the Zohar, that's where this paragraph comes from. That God, you are one, but no, not a numerical one, and there's no thought that can possibly grasp you, and etc. But then it says that you have created these levels which are called sphirot. Tikkunim, it says one is long, one is short, one is in the middle. In the middle. Okay, this is all coming to explain the sentence that we had. This is always sentence. What's the sentence? Let's go back. Let's go back a little bit here. Here, what's that? Here. Okay, the sentence comes from Erdana, that God says, I will go down to see what is going on in Sodom and Amor. Those were decadent, sadistic cities, Sodom and Amor. And God said, I will go down to see. What does it mean, I will go down? So the Rebbe brings to explain this first sentence from this introduction to the Zohar. And it says that Elijah said that God, you are one, and etc. You are one, but not a numerical one. You put out 10 sphirot. And then afterwards it says there's one that's long, one that's short, and one that's in the middle. Those are the 10 sphirot in general. They can be arranged in 3 pillars. One long, that's the right side. One short, that's the left side. And one that's in the middle, that's the middle. That's what we're going to explain now. Here we go. So remember, what we're talking about here now is how God cares about us, how he reacts to what we do, how he reacts to everything that we do. That's by means of his sphirot. What's called the sphirot? It says one is long, one is short, one is in the middle. So the Rebbe said, Chesed, the right side of God, we're created in God's image, right? So a person has a body. So God, so to speak, has the body. What type of body has God got? God is infinite. It says, yes, he is infinite, but also God makes 10 sphirot, which enables him to relate to the physical, and even more to create the physical. He can come and create the physical. So that's what's one is one. There's these 10 sphirot, these 10 aspects. Just like in our souls, there's 10 aspects. And 3 of them are intellect, and 7 of them are emotions. And these emotions can be divided into these 3 pillars: long, short, and the middle. Long, that's chesed, that's kindness, coming down. Oh, God comes down from below to above. It's also called arich, long. Lefishu, because let me get the pointer over here. Who mitpashet, it comes down milamayla, from the highest of highs to below. Right? That's also how God creates the world. The world comes down from this high, tremendous level. We talked about above this tzimtzum and all the veils and everything, and he's creating us. That's the long pillar. That's the long aspect of God, the kind aspect of God. Like water that comes down from a high place to a low. But Gevurot, the limited one, the short side of God, this is matalamayla. This is because the whole world is created by God, right? So this is our ability to influence God from below to above. That's called short because it's makatzer umagbil hashpa chesed, because it can limit what God gives down. This short aspect of God, why is it called short? Because this is what we do that God reacts to. So God coming down from above to below, that's just God creating without any conditions, unconditionally. But it's not 100% unconditional, because God is coming down from above to below, so to speak. He's creating the world so that we will serve him. That's why he's doing it. And that service that's going from below to above, that determines any future blessings that we get. So therefore, from below to above, it's called short because it shortens, so to speak, God's blessing. It's according to what comes from below to above, according to what comes below to above, and according to what we do, this determines the blessing that God gives from above to below. So God's blessing, he wants to give long, unlimited, but he wants us to work for it. That's from below to above. And according to how we work, that makes God's blessing short. That shortens it. And that's what it says that God said, I will go down and I will see what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. What does it mean God has to come down? It says, I will see, like the screams that are coming up from below to above. That's how I will come down from above to below. In other words, God gives, he creates unconditionally, unconditionally creates. But on the other hand, he's creating everything unconditionally so that we will serve him. And if we don't serve him properly, like it was in Sodom and Gomorrah, that there was the opposite. There was cruelty in this. So therefore, according to what we do from below to above, that's the whole reason God is creating the world, that we should serve him. So from below to above, if they're not serving him from below to above and doing the opposite, and then God, so to speak, the blessing that comes down is different. We affect God, so to speak. Why do I say so to speak? Because the only reason we affect God is because that's the way God determined it. That's the way God set the whole thing up. So it's not really that we are God, whatever. We're not calling the shots. But on the other hand, we definitely are. God created the world so that the world is in our hands. So that's what God said, I will go down according to the screams that are coming up. How things are coming up, that's how I will react. You shoving that they should be equal, what goes up and what comes down. But because this blessing that God gives from above to below, this is what's called Or Yashar. Here's another Kabbalistic idea for you. A straight light that comes down, and kindness, God's kindness. Look, therefore God said, I will come down first. Erda, God said, I will come down, and then I will see. What do you mean? We just finished saying that God goes down according to what we do. So the sentence should say, I see that they're doing bad, therefore I'm going to come down. That determines how, but it doesn't say that. It says, God says, first, I will come down. Why? Because first of all, God is creating everybody. He's creating everybody down in the world, right? And he's reminding everyone that he's the creator. We don't really create anything. We're not really the bosses over here. But nevertheless, God says, I'm coming down, I'm creating everybody, but I will see, in other words, according to what's coming up, afterwards, I will see, and then I will accordingly react. So that's the long side of God. That's what's called the right side of God, kindness. The left side of God, that's severity. And God's severity determines God's kindness. But the kindness has to be first. First, God has to create everything. And we said that there's three pillars. The one is the middle one. That's Beinoni. That's the middle one. There's a short and a long. And that's Gavur and Chesed. And Beinoni is the middle one. Hu Rachmanis. This is mercy. Mercy is a mamutza, is a the connector, bein chesed, between kindness, God's love, unconditional giving, shu, which is lahavchin. I'm sorry, lo lahavchin. I skipped a word. Shu, shalo, not lahavchin, to discern at all. That's the long pillar. God's kindness, just coming down and creating everything. Even though that it's not, God just creates evil people, good people. Ubein gevura. But then there's the other side of God, which is severity. Only giving to who deserves, reacting to what we do. Ledun im hagon, if a person is fitting to receive blessings or not. And if he's not fitting, so doesn't get anything, gets light. That's what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. God destroyed them. But then there's a third pillar, and that's called mercy. And mercy is a mamutza that's between God's kindness, which is unconditional, and God's severity, which is only conditional, only in the condition that we serve him does he give. And mercy is, in a way, the main aspect of God. This is reacting to what we do, but giving even if people are not fitting. In other words, judging everyone, but giving giving in a way that might fix everybody up. That's what mercy is. Right? Severity is, I'm only going to give to the people who really deserve it. That's severity. Kindness is, I'm giving to everybody. Right? It goes up on the top of a building, throws $100 bills down. Right? And that's from above to below. From below to above is, let's say he wants to give out $100 bills, he goes down to the first floor and he looks and sees, examines everybody if they're really fitting or not. And what's mercy? Mercy is going down to the first floor, looking and seeing who deserves or not. And even the people that don't deserve, you give to them. But you give to them with a warning, you give to them with the instructions, you give to them. That's what mercy is. So kindness, you don't care if people improve or not. You just want to give. And severity, you also really don't care if people deserve or not. If he doesn't deserve, you don't give him at all. But kindness, that's in the middle. That's if people don't deserve, you give them in order that they should fix themselves. That's mercy. It's giving in a just way. Okay, let's continue this. So what have we explained up to now? What have we explained? The job of the Jewish people is to get everyone in the world to worship God. Only God. Why? Because God is creating everybody. Everybody. And God is creating everything. And God is enlivening everything. And now we're going to get to another thing, that God is also directing everything. And that was the point that we had in the beginning. That God says, I hear the cries of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to go down and react to them and see what to do. So God, so to speak, is reacting to what we do. We said before, that's like gevura, or like mercy. Depends how it... So God is coming down, and there's an interaction here between us and God. We're going to see this interaction as a very deep thing. It's, in a way, the basis of the whole Hasidic movement. And it's called, the basic idea, and it's called hashgacha pratit. Hashgacha pratit means that God directs everything in the world, and he cares about everything in the world. Everything, every detail is being created and directed by God. And everything that we see, every interaction, is an amazing miracle of God. Every interaction, right? An ant finds a piece of sugar, a cat finds a place to sleep. Every detail in the world, billions and billions of bugs in the Amazon desert, jungles, and every single one of them is an amazing miracle of God, and how they meet one another and what they do to one another, who eats who. It's called hashgacha pratit. And that it in no way disturbs our free will, and it also in no way disturbs God's oneness. How does this work? Let's go. That's what the Rebbe is going to talk about. That's why we say in our prayers, Ein Kelokeinu, there's nothing like our God. And the God of Israel creates everything, directs everything, loves everything, and every interaction, every action is very important to God. Let's see, let's go. So that's what God is saying here. Sodom and Amorah are very cruel people. Sodom, what is it? They were very cruel people. And they tortured. And God said, I'm going to go down now, and I'm going to see how it is from their screams. So if you look in the sentence, which we're not going to look through now, I'm not going to, the Rebbe, it's enough to see. The Rebbe, it says, I'm going to go down and see, I'm going to react to their screams. The word screams here, hakata'akata, is feminine. And it's also the screams that are coming up to me. Haba'ah, that's also feminine. And then asu, what they are doing, that's feminine and masculine. In plural, there's no feminine and masculine in this case. Okay, so what does it mean screams are coming? The feminine screams, what does that mean? Also understand, what does it mean that God said, I will go down now? God said, I will go down, not now, I'm sorry, I will go down and see. God has to go down. God is everywhere. Isn't it so that God looks and he sees everything? There's no place where God is. So what does it mean? God said, I'm going to go down. Doesn't it mean that, doesn't it so that even from the heavens, God sees everything? He doesn't have to, right? We think that God is very high above us, but the fact is God immediately sees everything. What does it God have to say? I'm going to go down to see what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so it says the Rebbe, the word katsa'akata, the screams, the feminine screams, this is a scream which comes from below, goes up from this severity, like we said before, gevura. That's from below to above. That's the feminine aspect. That's the left side. That's why we always refer to God in masculine, because that's the giving side. God is always giving everything. And the Jewish people are feminine. That's going up from below to above. This is what's called God's kingship. This is his severity. Dina de malchuta dina. Like it says, the severity of the king, that's the law. That's the law. Rak, so the law, legal, the severities of a place, that's called kingship. Rakshu dina rafia. It says not a severe judgment. Like it says, Melech b'mishpat yamid oretz. God is judging the world in order that the world should go properly. He's not doing it in order to just punish people. That's what it means. The feminine scream, this is called what's happening from below, coming up. Like it says, Be'erev hi ba'ah, Rachel ba'ah. It's coming from below to above. Let's explain this. What does it mean? So if so, it comes out like this, that God is high and that we're low. So maybe God doesn't fill the whole world, huh? He says, no, we just finished learning that there's no place that's empty from God. So how does it work? So it says, listen to this. Biorinyan, let's explain this. First of all, we should precede the language which is very common in the Talmud, in the words of the rabbis. Galui v'yadua lifnei mi she'omer b'hoy olam. It is revealed and known before the one who spoke and created the world. Right? Sometimes in the Talmud or in the Midrash, and when they want to get a point across, so they'll say, it is revealed and known before the one who created the world that crime does not pay. It is a revealed thing and known in the world that God is merciful for everyone. It's a revealed, right, and known to before the one who created it in front of God. So in other words, it is known automatically and revealed automatically to before God, X, Y, Z, right? The charity is a good thing. It's so it says Galui v'yadua means that it's already revealed and it's already known to God everything. Because philosophim, the philosophers. And now the Rebbe is going to give us a few really good reasons not to believe in God. Not to believe in God. Why? Because the genius philosophers, Aristotle, who knows, the greatest philosophers in the world, Immanuel Kant, right? These people are just genius minds that they had. But nevertheless, Nilu, it was impossible for them, Lahasig, to understand the idea of Hashgacha Pratit. It is impossible for them, it was impossible for them to understand, to grasp in any way. They could not bring this in any way into even, how do you say, consideration that God pays attention to every detail in the world. Come on, like it says, Ein Adam Nokef Etzbo Milamata, a person cannot even move his finger unless it is announced in heaven that this is going to happen. Why can't the philosophers understand this? I mean, here's the Rebbe is talking about it. What's the problem? What's the problem? At least understand that there's an idea like this. They can't even consider the idea. Why? The kasha lahem, the idea that God cares about every detail and determines every detail. The kasha lahem, that's what's called hashkacha pratit. Hashkacha pratit means God's direction in details. Details. How do they say that God is in the details? They can't. This is impossible for them. The kasha lahem, and we're talking about even religious philosophers. It's impossible. It's hard for them. Kevan shehu, because they understand that God is yachid u'miyuchad echad emet. God is true. He is the true unity. If so, how could it be possible that God knows all the details and that God directs all the details, letet dato, to put his mind on so many multitude of things, on every little bug, on every little protozoa, and every atom that's in some nebulae in some solar system. That's a trillion light years away from here. God cares about every little detail and everything. If so, that's the opposite of what Judaism is supposed to be. Now, here the Rebbe is talking about not atheistic philosophers. For sure, they can't understand. But he's talking about even Jewish philosophers, Jewish religious philosophers, and they believe in the oneness of God. They believe in the oneness of God, but they cannot accept in any way that God cares about details. How can you say a thing like that? It means that God, what type of a God cares about, if this bird eats this worm or this fish eats this snail? What type of a God is that? And what is the difference? And even if he does, why would he care? Why would God care about a stupid thing like that? Right? It's like little kids fighting over a popsicle stick or something like that. God really cares about what happens on some goat on some mountain if he finds a piece of vegetation to eat or not. That God really cares about that, and he directs it, and he moves, and he creates the what? Who needs a God like that? And so the rabbis therefore want to answer this by saying that Galui v'yadua, it is known automatically and known in front of God. She'en yadiyah told that God knows things. It's not kedimyan yadiyas adam. It's not like we know things. When we know something, we have to hesig a davar. We have to know something that in the beginning we didn't know. First, I didn't know it, and then I have to put effort in and attention to something, and then I know it. Okay, she'yadua, when there's something I didn't know, and when I do know it, haridata u'melubeshes biyadiyah zu, then I put my mind into that thing. Umachshava zu notenet dato, and this thought puts my mind lahasigo to grasp it. V'kodem yadiyato, before I knew it, hayadato panui, my mind was empty. So it's a difference. It's a hitpalut, right? It's like saying to somebody, "Did you know that that Sudan is in the middle of Africa?" Really? I didn't know that. I thought Sudan was in the North Pole. No. Okay. Now I know it. It was before I didn't know it, and now I do know it. right? Do you know how many people live in Sudan? No, I don't know, but I guess maybe 100, 200. No, there's millions of people that live there. Are there any penguins there? What penguins in Sudan? Oh yeah, it's not in the. So before that, I didn't know, and now I do know. Right? I do know the thing. The same thing. Let's say the elections. Who's won? Who won? You know who won the American elections? I don't know. Kennedy? Is he still alive? Kennedy? No, no. What are you talking about? There were just elections and somebody won. Then I find out, oh, this guy won. But before I didn't know that it happened. But God knows everything. He knows the future. He knows the past. He's creating everything. In fact, God's creating time. So by God, time, the idea of past, present, and future, it's just a creation. He's not creating it within time. God is not within time. In the future, he creates the future. God creates the. So God, therefore, we can't possibly understand this. But all existence already exists within God. If so, when God knows something above, Yediato, his knowledge, Shiodea Kolat Lomot, that he knows all of the worlds and every single detail. It's not that God all of a sudden starts to be aware of something and it's grasped in this aspect, and God is now concentrating on this. It's automatically known. It's known in front of him. They're automatically. And he doesn't have to know it in order to. Okay, this of course is incomprehensible to us because we're talking about reality. But I can give you some examples that show a little bit, but it's not going to really. Let's say, for instance, a movie director, and he makes a movie, finishes the movie, and he puts it in a movie form, and nobody knows what's in the movie. No one knows it's in the movie, right? The movie will soon to be released, right? The movie, The Monster That Devoured Cleveland or something, right? So he's going to movie. So everybody's sitting in the movie and they're all biting their nails, but he's sitting, he knows what's going to happen, right? He's already done the whole thing. It's already there, created by him. So something like that is with the world. It's a poor example because, of course, the producer did not create the people that are there. And what's going on in the movie is not really real. It's just a picture of something that happened a long time ago. But by us, things are really existing, and every existence, God already knows everything automatically. You might say, one second, if God knows automatically, so then I don't have any free will because it's already determined what I'm going to do. So the answer to that, I mean, a simple answer, I think, okay, let's say it's true. The fact is, it's not true. But let's say it is true. And everything you do has been predetermined. Okay? Now what are you going to do? So you say, well, whatever I do is predetermined. So I'm not going to do that because God knows that. So I'm not going to do this because God knows that. So what are you going to do? Well, I'll do nothing. Well, God knew that also. Yeah. So what should I do? So the answer is forget it. God's knowledge is not like your knowledge. What do you mean God knows everything that's going to happen? That doesn't make any sense. It's just right, but it's true. So it doesn't make any sense. But God wants you to live your life, and you have to make your decisions. And your decisions are real decisions. That God knows everything, that's not any way relevant to what we're doing here. It is relevant to know of God's infinity, of how infinite is the God that we're serving. So it says, since everything is known in front of God. Here the Rebbe says, here, I'll give you an example. How is it that God can know everything? It says very simple. It's understood, self-understood. It's obvious. If God can enliven everything and he can create everything, and he doesn't create it by means of being inside of it, right? All these bugs and things, they don't feel God is creating them. How much more so that God can know the thing. If he's creating it, he's creating everything first. It's another helicopter. It's another wounded soldier. Okay. I live right near to a hospital, and they bring the wounded soldiers by helicopter. So every time I helicopter, no, it's a wounded soldier. Okay. So Kevin Shehu Galoi V'Yadua, since everything is automatically known to God, as Ein Shayach Klal Kushatam, that's not relevant, the question of the philosophers, that maybe, how can God, if he's one, how can he be interested in this tremendous diversity of the world? Every atom, every molecule, every bug, how could it possibly be? That we're trying to put our limitations on God. We cannot know everything at the same time. Only by means of knowing and being put into that thing. That's what we say, that my thoughts are not like your thoughts, says God. The point of this whole thing is that God is infinitely more real than we are. But don't think that because he's more real than we are, therefore his reality is so unlike our reality that he doesn't care about us. We're like zero. So the answer is yes, it's true. We really are zero. We're much more zero than we can possibly imagine. But we're important to God. If we're zero, how can we be important to God? You don't understand it? Nobody understands it, but that's the fact. God is creating us from nothing. He's enlivening us every second, and he cares about what we do. And everything is directed by him. So why does he care? It's like in the Bible, right? It says the Bible existed before the world existed. The world was created from the Torah. But it says in the Torah that God gave Abraham a test to take his son to kill him. And Abraham passed the test. What's the big deal? He passed the test. It was already known before. The Torah was written before the world. It was written before Abraham. So the answer to that is that what man does is tremendously important to God. And it's totally not understandable. The same thing with our prayers. We can pray and change God's will. Right? Uncle Louis is sick, and we pray, God, please save Uncle Louis. And the doctors come in and they say, I'm sorry, but there's nothing that we can do. He's gone. And we pray, don't worry about retell him, and all of a sudden Uncle Louis gets better. How can it be? We changed God's will. Maybe it was God's will that he should be sick, or so it says, yes, we don't understand it. And for sure it was God's will that he should be sick and that he should get better. But if we wouldn't pray, he wouldn't have gotten better. Huh? We just can't say, Ke Sarah, Sarah, what do we have to pray for? Right? These Jewish people, they have 3 times a day we pray. The only religions, I think, they all pray. Right? The idea of prayer is that we can change from above. Okay, all the other religions, who knows who they pray to? But we're praying to the essence of God. The essence of God is totally unlimited. It's not a picture. It's not a being. How can it? So he says that's the only God everybody should pray to, because that God that creates you, he listens to your prayers and he changes according to your prayer. We're living in a miraculous world. I mean, you can understand that God creates me. That God creates me, I can understand, because here I am. Right? That's a bigger miracle than anything else, that we're being created. That God knows everything is a lesser miracle. That's what he said in the parentheses over there. That's what it means, not my thoughts, other thoughts. He says, a maskil yovin, a person that thinks into this, the dakos, the fineness of this, the local mocha sobildo, and not every mind can bear these thoughts. These thoughts are like, they can scramble your brains if you think too much about it. Vehine kasiv, it says, Shiva Elo Ein Hashem. It's a prophecy to Zechariah. Zechariah, he saw a menorah with 7 stems. He says these 7 stems, these are the eyes of God. And they're Mishotatim B'Kol Oretz. They, and he says, survey the whole world. Mishotatim is masculine. And then there's another sentence that says in Divrei Yomim, in Chronicles, the book of Chronicles, it says, the eyes of God, Mishotatot, the eyes of God survey the world. This is feminine. So sometimes God surveys the world in a masculine way, and sometimes in a feminine way. What's going on? What does it mean? Yesh Lavin, we have to understand the whole idea of God masculine way of surveying the world and feminine way of surveying the world. This seems to also to indicate that God doesn't know everything automatically. Like we learned over here, I will go down and I will see. That God has to go down and investigate. He has to go and survey by means of seeing. So this is like hitlabshus, that God has to sort of clothe himself and concentrate himself in the thing that's seen. And this seems to be exactly the opposite of what we just finished explaining, that everything's automatically known. So is everything automatically known to God, or does God have to invest a certain attention to the thing? So, of course, both of them are true, and let's see how. The Inyan is like this. Note it's known that in the 10 Sfirot, there are lights and vessels. Because the level of Chesed and Gevura, this is the vessels. But the light which is in the vessels, this is pure godliness. The La Mikan Ilos Kalal, that he is not any of these emotions or aspects at all. Iukal. Raksha or mitlabesh bakli. The light goes into the vessel. The light goes into the vessel. The vessel is chesed or gevura. And the other emotions, they are called vessels. Okay, we talked about this. Remember in the beginning, we talked about this also. Let's just take a simple example of a person. What is a person? A human being. What's a human being? Intellect, emotions. Now they have this artificial intelligence. They can make robots that talk just like people and they reply just like people. And they can put a computer in them and they can answer questions. You can ask them mathematics. They can answer questions. What is lacking? What's the difference between a robot and a human being? Right. Well, a robot, if you take away from the robot his ability to respond to you, right? It becomes broken. The ability to respond, then you can throw the robot away. You can throw him away. It's not, it's like a what is it? A vacuum cleaner. It doesn't work. So you try to fix it. Doesn't work. You have to throw it away. It's not human. That's the point. It's not human. What is the human part of a human? What's the human part of a human? So the human part of the human is not his mind, because artificial robot can't have a mind. It's not his emotions, because you can simulate emotions. There's actors in movies that are excellent at conveying emotions that aren't really real. They're just pretending, wherefore out thou, out damned spot. It's just pretending that they are, in love, or that they're, afraid or whatever. Right? So what is really a human being? So the answer is human being is the soul. The soul. And therefore, if a person, God forbid, loses all of his intellect, he goes into a coma, still is a person. Right? Still is a person that's there. And he still is alive. And there are many cases where the doctors say, listen, your grandfather, his life is not in danger, but his mind is just, you think it's ever going to come back? Maybe as a chance, but I don't know. So, but the chance is very slim, and sometimes even if not, a lot of times there's miracles that happen. The point is the soul, that's what the person is. That's a soul. And the soul, that's what's human. A human soul is different than an animal soul, than than the electricity that makes a robot work. So something like that is the emotions and the intellect, and the essence of the person, which is a soul, is these ideas of lights and vessels. God creates the worlds through his 10 Sfirot, but the external of the 10 Sfirot, that's like the personality of God. That's his intellect, his emotions, and etc. But the essence, that's the light, pure godliness. That's pure godliness, which is inside. Okay. So the pure godliness is unaffected by the worlds. Is unaffected by the world. Not like a human being that his soul is affected by what happens. But God is the pure. But the vessels of God are, yes, affected by the world. That's God's person, how he interacts with the world. There's these vessels, by means of them is drawn down this light in order to enliven the creations which are limited, that God can create the angels, Michael, Gabriel, etc. There's from the level of the angel Michael, that's from God's kindness. Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, that's from Gevura. That's the vessels of God. That it's impossible that this could come from the light itself. The light which is in the vessels is too powerful. But that's why God makes vessels. So just like you can't talk if you don't have a mouth. Just like it's impossible that there can be, let's say, money coming from the soul. It has to be given by means of the body that gives shenotenet haneshama tzedakah alani, that that's my soul, decide to give charity to a poor person. So it has to come through my kindness and through my muscles, through my brain, and through my nerves, through my muscles, and my bones, to my fingers, until it comes to my hand, it actually physically gives charity. But who's giving the charity? Not my hand, me. Who is me? My soul. And similarly, by means of these vessels of the 10 Sefirot of God, there's also there's going down, and there's also elevating, merit, and how do you say, the guilt and innocence of all the creations. God judges by means of when a person does a sin, so he gives himself one prosecutor, and it makes a blemish and a stain in that angel, so to speak, that goes from below to above. Because there's angels which receive from this aspect, that's from severity, and there's angels which receive from kindness, like the angel Michael and Gabriel, like we just finished saying. So Gabriel, he's the judging angel, and Michael, that's the giving angel. This angel elevates things to a higher angel than it, until it goes up to the vessels of the 10 Sefirot of Atzilut, that's, so to speak, godliness himself, of the vessels of godliness, and then find that comes back down into Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, and in this is the light of God. And so it comes out that God, he's really reacting the essence of God, but he's doing it through all these vessels. So it comes out that by means of the vessels of the 10 Sefirot, goes up to the infinite light of God, which is in these vessels of the 10 Sefirot, goes up to the light. Therefore, it says on this, the eyes of God, mishotatot, that's what the eyes of God are surveying, feminine. These are the vessels of the 10 Sefirot. That's the vessels. And also the angels that receive from them, they're also called Mari Enayim. This is a Kabbalistic thing. They're called the eyes of God. There's some that are the eyes of God, some are called the ears of God. And they're Mishotatim. These are masculine surveyors. What does it mean? They react to what comes from below to above. From the vessels comes from below to above. And then God reacts and sends other vessels from above to below. That's what it means. Dam alamayla mimach. You should know what is above you. And there's some that interpret it, you should know that what is above comes from you. What you do in this world sends energy to God from below to above, and then God reacts from above to below. This is the eye that sees, etc. In these vessels, it's relevant to say that they survey feminine, that's from below to above, and afterwards they react from above to below. That's his labshus in the vessels. They can be interested in the things in the world, and by them and by means of them is elevated the thing from the light which is included in the 10 Sefirot, and that's inside of these vessels. That's something like Galui V'Yadua. It's automatically known. So the lights which are inside of the vessels are pure, infinite reality, oneness of God that is totally not affected by the world. But there's a process by which there's vessels of God. And these vessels are, so to speak, affected by the world. And eventually they elevate what happens in the world to God. Same thing by us, right? A piano player, he touches the keys, he feels the keys with his fingers. His fingers are just like my fingers. But it sends impulses up to his emotions, to his intellect. Then it starts to interpret it differently. And finally it comes to him. His genius comes through. The genius is unique to a person. What is it? The robots don't have genius. But they can't make something new. They can only interpret, rearrange things that were, whatever. You can't feel the humanness of it. So that's the whole idea of how God actually reacts and acts, cares about the world. That's through the vessels of the 10 Sefirot. That's by what's called the eyes of God, that masculine survey the world. This is what's called Galui V'Yadua. And by means of this, it expresses the light which is in the vessels. That by the light of God, then everything is already known automatically. Meluvash Bekalim, and that light is in the vessels because the light really is not really any of these emotions or character traits at all. Just like the essence of the soul of a person is not really connected to his thought and his emotions. And the proof is that when the thought and emotions and intellect and emotions are gone, the person is still there. The same thing with God. But somehow or other, God made it that the world affects what's called the vessels of God's sphirot, and these vessels pass from below to above what's happening in the world, and God, in his essence, reacts. So this answers what the philosophers say, that they can't grasp this idea of hashgacha pratis, that God cares about every detail, because they say, what doesn't that make God into many? It divides God. And so we say, no, it's not that God is divided. His vessels, that's the eyes of God that mishotatot, that feminine, survey the world from below to above. This is like the vessels. But God that knows everything automatically, that's the light which is in the vessels, and he sees everything. He sees everything which is going on. So if so, God's oneness encompasses everything, but unlike our thought, that if we think about something, it encompasses it. God's also being encompasses the reality of the world, but unlike our thought and the thing, God reacts to what we do. And God is involved in what we do. And that's by means of God's vessels. This is a way of sort of bringing something which is totally incomprehensible a little bit closer to comprehension. But don't think that in any way this really explains it, unless you're some sort of a genius Kabbalist. The Rebbe is just telling us the way it is. So it becomes a little bit more accessible to our understandings. This idea of vessels and lights. But the fact is, the vessels are also infinite. The vessels are not anything, God's wisdom is not anything like our wisdom. However it is, though, God cares about every detail, is involved in every detail in the world, and that is not from his essence, so to speak, but by means of the vessels of which contain his essence. And those are articulated that they care about the world and that they act in the world and they react to the world. And that's what's brought in our Torah portion, that God said as soon as he heard, so to speak, the cries of the people in Sodom, he said, I'm going to go down. When he says, I'm going to go down, this is referring to the vessels of godliness which react to the world. Okay. But this does not in any way contradict God's total oneness and that there's nothing except for him. Next.